this was probably one of the scariest individuals you could deal with, somebody who would hesitate to walk right up to your house and walk in and commit a murder.
This guy, he would take blood and bathe himself in it.
Richard Trenton Chase, otherwise known as the Vampire of Sacramento.
We have a sick son of a bitch. We have to catch this guy.
Hi, I'm Nick from True Crime Uncut. Welcome to Questions With. This week we're speaking with retired Lieutenant Ray Biondi, former crime scene investigator Frank Davidson, and retired detective Bill Roberts about one of the most bizarre and truly terrifying serial murder cases in California history.
As a crime scene investigator, you see all kinds of weird things, but this is one of the weirdest I've been to in many years.
The beginning of this investigation was towards the end of 1977, in December. We had a drive-by shooting that was a kind of strange situation. Ambrose Griffin was an engineer for the federal government, was unloading groceries from his car along with his family into the house. Well, he dropped, and the family first thought maybe he had a heart attack.
I was working as a crime scene investigator, investigate burglaries, rapes, robberies, whatever comes up. And I got the call of the Ambrose Griffin, I guess was the first one. Him and his wife had been to the grocery store, came home, pulled in the driveway. Both of them carried some groceries into the house. Ambrose Griffin went out to get a second load of groceries and never came back. Well, she went out and found him laying in the driveway, been shot. Well, at the time, they thought someone may have been shooting at street lights or yard lights or whatever. But he died.
After questioning the family and stuff, they quickly realized that, no, this isn't something that's of a personal nature, because Mr. Griffin was a real nice person and shouldn't have anything in his background that would lead to something like this.
The next day, we found shell casings about the next house west of his, laying on the edge of the highway, the roadway, which meant that he had a semi-automatic weapon, and they ejected the shell casings probably out the window onto the hood or the fender of the car. As he drove away, they fell off. That was some of the comparisons they needed to make comparison on the shell casings and the ammo that he was using.
It stood out because it was in Carmichael. Carmichael, at that time, and I believe still is, a very nice suburb of Sacramento, in Sacramento County. Things like that, a homicide, in fact, a shooting, almost never occurred in that area. So when we had a homicide where somebody who was unloading groceries from the back of his car was shot in the back 3 times, yeah, that stood out. That stood out. We never had drive-by shootings, let alone drive-by homicides in Sacramento. We just simply never used that terminology because it didn't happen.
The caliber of the weapon was determined to be a .22 caliber after projectiles were recovered. What we learned shortly after that probably one day before that, in the same neighborhood, a lady was in her kitchen, and she noticed her window exploded, and she felt something whiz through her air. Detectives went to the house, and they dug around in the cabinets and through the china, and they dug out a .22 caliber slug. Eventually, the crime lab was able to tell us that the .22 calibers were fired from the same gun that killed Mr. Griffin and also tried to kill this lady. Then in January of 1978, on January 23rd, we had suspicious circumstances of an individual in the close area where Ambrose Griffin was also murdered, in the same neighborhood. This individual was first seen walking around trying to get into a house, and the female inside the house saw him, and of course she went around locking doors and windows, and he didn't get in and left. Shortly after that, there was a couple returning from shopping, and they went in their house. They heard somebody in the house, and the homeowner saw a man flee out the back. He chased him, but eventually lost him. He lost them in a parking lot. It was a shopping center. What they determined, he had a number of valuable items laid out that apparently was going to steal before he got surprised. But he also left a calling card, and that he defecated in the baby's crib. He was then seen, and this individual was described as being very dirty, disheveled looking, skinny young man, wearing an orange coat that seemed to be also very dirty. He was then seen walking across several lawns in the area and looking in the houses. On that same day, later in the day, we got a call on Tioga Way, which was in the same neighborhood. Teresa Wallen was our murder victim there. It was a very involved scene because we had casings on the floor. We had a mutilated body in the back. The scene work went on nearly 24 hours there just to try to figure everything out of that house.
He shot her and dragged her through the house. The husband came home, and he called the sheriff's department. The officers that arrived made the decision that they needed detectives there and they needed a crime scene investigation there. So I was dispatched, waited until the detectives arrived and went in together. So nothing be disturbed and everything, see what was going on. And we could see where she was. The trash had been dropped at the front door. She had a trash bag. You could see where she was dragged across the floor with the blood stains and down the hallway. It's the most bizarre thing you'd ever see, because the lady was with bare from the waist down. Her abdomen was cut open. The internal organs had been moved around. And he had taken dog feces and put it in her mouth. And just weird things. I found a circle on the floor, like a cup or something been sitting. Well, I found a used yogurt cup that had been taken from the trash, apparently, and he had taken it to drink her blood.
That was the first one of the first murders I recall where a body had been eviscerated and mutilated, and the fact that finally somebody said, no, he was drinking blood. That was the first time and the only time in my career of 17 years of homicide that I ever encountered anything like that.
There was somebody who was pretty evil and twisted, and I just wanted to help get him off the street. So that was my main focus, was doing my leads, doing my stuff, anything I could to track this guy down. I think we started with Mr. Griffin, we started putting together pieces where we were getting reports of dogs and other animals being killed, mutilated, eviscerated, all of which were killed by .22s. Mr. Griffin was killed by a .22 caliber gun. And then, of course, we had Teresa Wallen homicide over on Tioga Way. She was shot 3 times with a .22 and eviscerated, and some horrid things done to that poor woman. And it was then when we thought, maybe we have a connection between all these 3, because all of these animals and things were, and some prowling reports that we started putting together, were in the neighborhood of Mr. Griffin, and Teresa Wallen was almost maybe a mile and a half from where that occurred. That's when Lieutenant Biondi said, we have a sick son of a bitch. We have to catch this guy.
She had no enemies, but she appeared to be another random victim of a killer with a .22 caliber weapon.
Got a nut on the loose, That's the only thing I could think of at the time. Some weird person.
All this activity was taking place in probably a mile square area, which had like 4 major shopping centers and densely populated suburban developments. So we drew that, drew all our activity to that mile square and had tremendous canvases going on. We were knocking on every door we could find. The Friday of that same week, we got called to Marywood. And that's where we had Evelyn Roth and Jason and Daniel Meredith and David Ferrari were all murdered. Well, 3 of them for sure were murdered in the house. The baby was missing.
There was a deputy, and he had the unfortunate fate of being the first officer on the scene at the Wallen homicide. Well, he was also the first officer on the scene at the Maroth homicide. Big, muscular, strong guy, bright. Right? I've never seen a person so ashen and pale in my entire life. And to set it off, of course, is the fog is lying low. Everything was kind of eerie about that. And then I can't tell you what detective came out and said, it's a bloodbath in there. And then they told us one by one that how he killed all the victims. And again, he disemboweled Mrs. Maroth and did other things.
But he had cut her abdomen open and messed around with the internal organs. Shot the son, and there's an 18-month-old baby she was babysitting, but the baby was missing.
As I walked in through a back door, the body of David Meredith was in the front room. Went to the back bedroom, was Evelyn Maroth, who had been propped up on her bed, and she'd also been mutilated. In the corner of that bedroom was Jason, the young boy, who was all dressed up in his clothes, ready to go to the snow. In the bathroom, the bathtub was full of bloody water. I don't know what the explanation for that was, but there was also some wet clothing there that apparently had been removed from Evelyn Maroth. Whether she had been in that tub, I'm not sure, or the reason for all the bloody water in there. In the other bedroom, there was the crib where the young David Ferrer was missing from, and you can see where a bullet had been fired through some of the bed clothing there. There was a big search put out for the body, or we assumed it was the body of the young baby. We had a sketch prepared from people who cited the individual that was doing the strange things, going in and out of houses. And that was disseminated as far as we could disseminate it throughout the county. The profile was kind of really based on what people had told us, a skinny, disheveled, dirty-looking individual, dirty clothing on. I don't think anybody realized that most of the dirty clothing was bloodstains, but he was always described as red ski parka. And the sketch was made primarily from that. What became really obvious very fast, very quickly, was that we were dealing with this killer whose activity was all in this confined area, basically, within a mile area. So I confident we were dealing all these crimes were related. And then the match of the empty casings and projectiles that were found, that it's all from the same gun. I mean, there was no question we were looking for a single killer. And then plus, of course, obvious, we had the mutilation of bodies at 2 different scenes. What were the chances you have in 1 week mutilated murders such as we had that were so similar?
A couple of things came into play at exactly the same time. They would give all the field detectives lead cards. You would go back to this command post, and they were usually pretty close. One of which I got was about Richard Trenton Chase. And I laugh now. When they gave me the name, I looked it up in the phone book. That was the first place I went. We didn't have radios and things like that. And that's where I got his first address and went and knocked on that door. Little did we know, he had moved from apartment 24 to apartment 15. It was just another lead. I didn't equate him to who he was and what he was until I went back to headquarters and started doing a record check on him, and I'm like, oh gosh, this might be him. I started finding out about his background. He was up in Pyramid Lake, Nevada, found nude, covered in blood, with a .22 about a year before all of this stuff started happening. Found out that we had arrested him for carrying a loaded and concealed weapon. Found out that he had been a walk away from a psychiatric hospital in Sacramento County and was deemed violent. So I'm putting all these things together. We had a flyer, which was a sketch of the suspect in the Teresa Wallen homicide. And I look at it and compare it to a mugshot we have, except the sketch doesn't have a mustache and goatee. So I penciled that in, and then I put it next to the mugshot, and I go, this is very close.
Finally, the 3 detectives who went out there to try to pick this guy up, and during that whole week, we had brought down many suspects, or strange, weird-looking individuals who seemed to fit the profile, and they were all cleared one way or another. But Richard Chase looked like he was really in the ballpark, and when they determined before they even went there, he had bought a .22, he had bought ammunition. He had this strange background. They had found out about the information at Pyramid Lake in Nevada. But they tried banging on his door, no answer. So finally one of the detectives went to an adjacent empty apartment, and they could hear him moving around. They made a big scene about, okay, we're going to leave. We'll come back later, Richard. We just want to talk to you. Of course, he bolted, and when he did, they caught him.
So I fly down the stairs and turn the corner, and they got him in a little pile there, and we start searching him. But the exhilarating moment was when we found Mr. Meredith's property on the suspect. We knew we had him. We got this crazy guy, you know.
He also had a .22 and a shoulder holster. So we were pretty confident we got the guy.
We put Mr. Chase in the back seat, and I got in the front seat, and we started off towards headquarters with Lieutenant Biondi following us in an unmarked car, and then walked him down the hallway where the interview rooms were located at that time. And so as I made the turn holding on to Mr. Chase, there was not a place for another human being. Everybody in the department, from our division as well as support groups, were standing on chairs, desks, wedged together just to see this monster that we brought in. It was kind of a stunning moment. It kind of took me back a little bit. And then they all applauded, that he was captured. So that was kind of a moment that I still talk about it to this day.
We hope you're enjoying this video so far. Please remember to subscribe and give us a thumbs up. Perhaps there's a killer you'd like to see us cover in the future. If so, let us know in the comments. But for now, back to the story of Richard Chase.
When the officers entered his apartment, I guess it was like a scene out of I don't know what.
It was a stinking mess when they got there with rotten meat on the counters and what have you. Except one drawer where his knives and stuff were kept was really neat and, like a surgeon would have,
There were body parts. I don't know whether animal or human, but things in his refrigerator and the freezer. Some mixture that was like probably some part of anatomy and Coke in a blender. But it was a real involved scene to where he obviously was dissecting and killing animals inside that apartment. The baby, David Ferreira, was our big concern at that time, although in the back of our mind we were pretty sure that he probably had been murdered also because of the blood and obviously a projectile had been fired into the bedclothing. But there was a big push to try to find David Ferreira, whether it be his body or him still be alive. And that was one of the first things the detective wanted to talk to him about, to see if they get any information about that. But the search went on for a long time. At one point, I asked that all the dumpsters in the area had been checked, because I've worked cases before where baby bodies are found in dumpsters. And so we had a big push on the detectives checking dumpsters behind all these supermarkets and various commercial establishments in the whole area, and to no avail.
So it was a couple of months later, we found the baby at a churchyard near where Chase lived. It was in a McDonald's French fry box.
And it was badly decomposed, of course, but definitely identified as David.
When we arrested him, he came out of the door with a McDonald's French fry box with bloody rags and miscellaneous things in it. Well, inside was a diaper pen that had a bear's head on it, a plastic bear's head for pinning on diapers. Well, when they found the baby in a similar type McDonald's French fry box, the matching pin was in the box with the baby.
The FBI had called him as just a blitz killer. Just walk right up and just kill you. No conversation, apparently, or trying to muscle his way in anywhere. He would simply shoot you. The classification from behavioral science was a disorganized killer, a loner that just acted on impulse and would do things like the blitz attack on Teresa Wallen right at her front door. No plan as to how he was going to commit the crime. Richard never really admitted anything. He acted like he was confused and then claimed he didn't kill anybody. At one point, I went in and tried to talk to him to no avail. He still denied killing anybody. He talked about killing dogs.
His stare, he didn't look at you. His eyes were constantly just darting, like he was trying to either find a way out of this. He knew he was caught. There was no doubt about it. He knew it. And then he tried to play it off like, I'm in trouble for a bunch of dogs? No, this is a little bit more important than dogs, you know. But he knew it. At one point in the interview room, we're talking to him about killing the animals and doing stuff. And in the middle of it, he just goes, Irish setters are the best. I'm like, holy cow, you're sick, boy, you know. And then reluctantly, we had to let the hardened homicide investigators in there to interrogate him because we couldn't break him. And a couple hours later, they come out and they go, there's no use. We can't get this guy. There's just not a thing.
Well, then he's booked into the jail. And of course, at that point, there was a public defender appointed to him, so we never talked to him after that. The community was really up in arms. Is a lot of headlines, a lot of real concern. And in my, experience, this was probably one of the scariest individuals you could deal with. Somebody who would hesitate to walk right up to your house. It could be high noon and walk in and commit a murder. There didn't seem to be anything that's going to stop him.
This neighborhood, after this incident, was less trusting. They didn't know what was going to happen because they didn't know where this nut was going to go next. In
the Maroth murders, or in Marywood, Jason Maroth was about the same age as my youngest son. And I had real close to a tearful moment then, before I went back outside to confront the rest of the police around the scene. Yeah, that was a very emotional. I mean, here was this kid all dressed up. His mother had bought him all these new clothes to go to the snow, and he simply was just executed like something in the way. I do remember that out of hundreds of murders. the feeling I had that day.
Well, it was disturbing to know something like that was going on in the neighborhood or in the world, for that goes.
Without a doubt, the single biggest case that I was ever involved in my entire 31-year career with the Sheriff's Department. Who could ever dream up someone like Richard Trenton Chase being as evil as he was and as perverted as he was, and then doing what he did to his victims? Who could ever think of a person like that? Well, I got to arrest him. So doesn't get much better than that in your career.
They decided he was fit to stand trial. He knew what was going on.
They devised a prosecutorial kind of a offense, if you will, that was going to fight the defense that he was insane. And the jury found in the prosecutor's favor and found him guilty of murder.
Former Lieutenant Ray Biondi passed away in February 2020, just shy of his 83rd birthday. Former Detective Bill Roberts passed away in March 2024. He was 79 years old. On May the 8th, 1979, Richard Chase was found guilty of 6 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to death in the gas chamber. But just over 18 months later, on December the 26th, 1980, 30-year-old Chase was found dead in his prison cell at San Quentin due to a self-inflicted overdose of antidepressants he'd been stockpiling. The exact reasons for Chase's apparent suicide remain unknown. We hope you enjoyed this video on the terrifying crimes of Richard Chase, the Vampire of Sacramento. If you'd like to see more true crime content like this on other serial killers, then make sure to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and let us know in the comments who you'd like us to cover next. Thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.